I'm going to walk through a couple of the common tasks that you'll need to do to keep your project synced with GitHub, as well as a few issues that you'll likely run into as well. So a lot of the issues that come up will be related to the fact that you might be working with a code base with another person, and so you're both making changes, or you might be conflicting with yourself. So for example, you might be editing things on GitHub, and then it's going to conflict with things that you're doing in Xcode. So let me kind of step through it task by task. So the first thing that's most common is you're just here cranking out features. And so if you just add some stuff, some more stuff here, and then you save, you'll notice that there's this notation that comes up here that says M. M means modified. You might also do any number of things, like, for example, you might create a new file. So let's say that you just add a new file. So this doesn't really matter, so I'll just create a new file here. And then you'll have an A, which means that there's a file to be added. And then let's say that I delete a file here. So I'll right click on this and I'll hit delete. Oops. So if I go to my source control, then once you are happy with a set of changes, like let's say that you've completed a feature, then you'll want to snapshot it. And snapshotting in Git is called committing. So every time you commit, then at that moment, you can always recover that state. So if I hit commit here, then what it does is notice that I made a modification to a set of files. And so when you click on the file that it modified, you'll see what they call the diff here, which is I added these 2 lines to what was previously here. I added this file, so there was no previous file, and now there is one. And then I deleted this file. And this project file is here because this is just something, some internal bookkeeping. So when I have a check mark next to all of these things, that means that all of these changes will be associated with this particular commit. So in this commit message here, you'll say added the liking feature, and then you'll commit these 4 changes. So for this class, it's okay to just put a check mark next to everything and just snapshot everything. But let me kind of briefly tell you what the professional standard is. So engineers are actually pretty picky in real life about what these commits look like. So you're not generally supposed to just commit everything in bulk here. So each commit is technically supposed to be just commits related to a particular feature. And the reason why you want to do this is you don't want to mix and match and you might be working on a number of features at the same time, or a number of things at the same time, or cleaning up some typos in one area and implementing a feature. So typically you want to keep your commits pretty clean. And this is just a hygiene thing. So the reason why is because it's for yourself. When you're looking back at issues or in history, you can look back to see all the changes that were related to a particular feature. And it's also for your coworkers. And one of the reasons that it's important is it's practical, but also it's one of those culture elements. So for example, just like if you received an email from a coworker and had a lot of spelling errors and issues like that, you'd be like, oh gosh, is this person a professional? So engineers are kind of snobby when it comes to commits as well, and they have that same reaction. So if you're submitting your project for review to a company, they're going to look at your commit history and they're like, oh, here's a common thing that people will do, stuff, and they'll put stuff here or more stuff, and it's really not descriptive of what that commit was. And that's something that if a company were looking at your commit history and they have very clearly described commits where it contains only things related to those changes, then they're usually happy to see that. Otherwise, it'll look unprofessional. So not something to worry about too much in this class. It's okay in this class just to commit everything, but just want you to be aware of that kind of professional standard. So go ahead and commit these 4 files. Once I've done this, you'll notice all those icons disappeared, and that's snapshotted. Now, that means that locally, I can always roll back kind of before those features or to this moment in time, but it's not in GitHub yet. So if I were to go to GitHub and if I were to look at some of these files, it still has all of my previous state here. So I can also look at the commit history here by clicking at 2 commits, and it's just those first 2 commits that I made. So if I want to upload it, then after you commit, then you'll want to push. So pushing it will push all of your commits to your remote, which in this case is GitHub. And so once I've done that and it hasn't complained, then I will go over here, and if I hit reload here, then I'll see that it has my most recent commits. And if I look into the repository, if I dug in here, I would see that the changes were there. So that's, as you're adding features, you should be committing and then pushing. So if, let's say somebody, maybe you, maybe your coworker makes some change. So if you're updating the README here, and let's say that hey, I've finished these features, that's fantastic. I'm going to mark them with an X. And by the way, once you mark that with an X in the README, it'll come back and it'll be checked like this. So I've made a change, or one of your collaborators pushed some of their work. Now at this point, so let's say that I'm not aware of that yet. And so in here, I'm just moving along and I'm adding more features, right? So I'm just coding it up and I'm happy with that code. I'm saying, hey, let me commit this now. So more sweet features. And I commit this. So this is now snapshotted locally. And remember, I have not pulled in those changes yet. So let's say that you're happy with the commit and you say, hey, okay, great, let me push this up to GitHub. So I hit push, and then it says it recognizes that my local repository doesn't have all the changes from GitHub. And so it actually does not let you push until you first have synced all of the updates from GitHub. So when you see this message, the local repository is out of date, make sure all changes have been pulled from the remote repository and try again. That means that before you push, you have to pull and make sure that all of your changes are in. I hit pull. At this time, it could be that your collaborator has made some changes in the same area, and there would be what's called a merge conflict, and you'd have to fix that. That's not going to happen much when you're working on a solo project. So right now, I've actually pulled in all the changes. So if I look at the README, I would see that that's there, and now I can push my changes. So previously there was an error here. Now I can hit push, and it should succeed. And so if I go to GitHub again, and then I go to my commit history, I'll see that it has both my README update as well as my features. And there's actually this commit where it kind of merged those things together. And so this actually has now the final state. So that's pushing. That's an error that you'll get when you're pulling. And then the final thing is if I'm pulling and I have uncommitted changes. So let's say that I'm working and one of my coworker says, hey, can you pull down some of my changes, check it out, see what you think. If you attempt to do this, pull, right? It's not, for safety reasons, Git is not going to allow you to do this without first doing something with your unsaved work here. So this is an uncommitted change, and you need to finish committing it. Before you can pull in your coworker's changes or your own changes. So now that I've committed it, I can pull, and that'll work. So fetch and refresh status, that's not something that you'll typically really ever use. Discard all changes means that if I have some uncommitted stuff like, oh, just messing around, right? So this is saved, but I'm like, okay, I'm done fooling around with this. Let me actually just bring it back to its previous state. I can just say discard all changes, and it'll revert it back to its previous state without that line. So be careful there, because it will throw away something you maybe don't intend to throw away. So that's all of the major use cases that you should need for all of the solo projects. Now, Git is a very complex tool, But you don't get to those use cases until you start to work with collaborators and then work with larger code bases with more complex use cases. And so this covers all of the basic tasks that you should be able to do using Git for solo project work.